Hello, Yvette, are you there?
I am, sweetie. How are you doing?
I'm all good. Ali Newell and Yvette Hastings here to those that are listening. Another one of our, well, what are these? They're informed gabblings, aren't they, Yvette? Our
Hmm.
informed gabblings of two women who are not setting themselves up to be experts in anything, but have an awful lot of experience and just want to offer women perhaps a bit of a different perspective on some of the things that are hanging around the zeitgeist at the moment. So today,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
think, yeah, and I think the other thing to sort of emphasise is we're completely normal and we're not Botoxed up to the
you
hilt.
speak for yourself. Yes, normal with a capital W. Um, yes, so today's subject matter is pelvic floor. Pelvic floor. Um, yeah, pelvic floor. I hate the term pelvic floor. Yvette, I don't like it because we haven't got a pelvic floor. We've got a pelvic diaphragm, and pelvic floor leads us down all kinds of roads of wrong
Hmm.
thinking about that
Yes.
area of the body. So um, it's an area that I spend a lot of time working with and have done since I was a very young person teaching fitness, because I think it's an area that we find, I don't know about you, a lot of people just don't want to talk about. They're too embarrassed.
Yeah, definitely. It's a sort of a taboo conversation to have. It's not something that even mums and daughters used to talk about, although perhaps they should have done, because obviously some teenagers can experience issues with
Yes.
bladder and other things down there, the unmentionables as they used to be
Mm,
called,
mm,
which is just crazy because they're part of our body.
mm.
And, when we first started talking, I was really pleased when you were able to explain to me that, as we've said before, the exercises that I was being told to do post surgery weren't the right ones for bladder health, and
Yes.
the
Yes.
pelvic floor wasn't a flat, hard surface.
Yes. Yes, well, the whole thing about the bladder, of course, and let's go in, shall we, initially with what people might be listening into this for. So, if you've read the title of pelvic floor, pelvic diaphragm, pelvic health, you're either here because you're wondering if it's already too late for you to work your pelvic diaphragm, or perhaps you're looking for advice on prevention. So, I think what we'll try and do with that today is try and just touch on this very huge area. It is a massive area
Yep.
of topic. It covers an awful lot of things. So no way we can go into detail with it all. But let's just give people a little taster of what is pelvic diaphragm, pelvic floor,
Yep.
and at what point it might become um, a malfunctioning, because it's not always about incontinence. The pelvic diaphragm does so much more than just continence. So you mentioned earlier the bladder. That's the first point of call for a lot of people is, am I going to wet myself? We all live in dread of, is for instance, getting old mean that you automatically are going to become incontinent? Short answer, no. So let's go through the age grouping. So we start off when you're little. The first thing that might affect your pelvic diaphragm and your pelvic health is toilet habits. Now, how to go to the toilet is a whole subject that I actually teach. We have very weird ideas of how to go to the loo, both fecally and urinally. So it is important that we are comfortable talking about going to the toilet. It is so silly that we're not, but there are lots of people out there that think they're cool, and we can talk about all these subjects now. Premenstrual tension, menopause, sex, all these things have become easier to talk about in the modern society. But actually, in truth, I don't believe they have. I think there are certain people who are really at ease with it, but there's an awful lot of people out there who would like to talk about it, but they really don't want to be so cool that they're having to confess everything in public. That they don't want to be, you can say the word vagina so many times and it really starts to get a bit grating on the ears, doesn't it? So
Mm.
we want to make it so that people feel able to open up, perhaps intimately, but confidently, either to their GP or to someone like me or you, if they think they might be anticipating or experiencing problems. Now, that ties up with me talking about childhood. It is important that as parents, we are very at ease with our children's body parts and going to the toilet. So we don't instill a shyness or a coyness or a reticence about acknowledging what goes on between our legs and in our pelvic area, because that way leads to all the consequent problems going forward, right up to when you're menopausal or indeed elderly, and you don't want to talk about the fact that you've become incontinent. So it starts young. So that's just touching there, because again, massive subject area and covers a lot of different medical issues, if you will, and qualifications. However, moving on to teenage years, as you rightly brought up, teenagers can become incontinent for various reasons. Again, massive area, needs specialist discussion in a lot of times, but it can again come down to toileting. When girls start their periods, it all gets a bit, shut the door, don't want to be seen if you're not at ease with it. And infections can be rife. Early sex, starting your sex life very early can all affect the pelvic diaphragm. All those things need discussing in their own right, but they are things to bear in mind in this conversation that we're just tapping into.
Yeah, and I
Then,
think the other thing we need to sort of just open up is the fact that some girls can get very embarrassed about going to the toilet at school
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
they get
yeah,
embarrassed, and also because the toilet area tends to be a place where some of the children congregate, and then
yes,
you feel, oh God, I can't do a plop plop because they'll
no,
hear, and when I
that,
come out, they'll laugh at me,
that's
and
exactly right.
that's just so awful. But I can see, there's that does happen.
Oh, I can remember doing it myself, Yvette. I can remember being at school and not wanting to sit on the seat because it could be dirty or covered in wee, and holding on to
Mm,
wees and poos, to be fair. And that
hmm
is the beginning of straining your pelvic diaphragm.
mm,
So it's really important that we initially get that whole area more openly spoken about, but not in a way that we have to be in your face about it. None of us, we don't want to be so super mega cool that we're forcing it down people's throats, if you wish. That's not a terrible term to use in this context. We
mm.
just want people to feel that they can ask the question and get the answer and be able to talk
Yeah,
freely.
and have the conversation with your children as well.
Yes,
Because
yeah,
another reason why children can get dehydrated is they don't want to drink because then they have to go to the toilet and then
yeah,
they get embarrassed, and that dehydration is just so bad, not only for the body but also for the brain.
yes. Oh, very good point there. Couldn't agree with you more. It's an overall health thing. This is why our pelvic diaphragm and our bladder and bowel and gut, it all communicates. It all has ongoing effects. We are a machine that works as a whole. We are a sum of the individual parts, and they all affect each other. So moving up in age, so we get to past teenage years and going into early 20s towards 30s, when some young people, maybe women, I mean, I think we should focus on women on this particular discussion. Young women will be um, potentially having children. I had my children at 20 and 24, so there we go. I was a very young mum. Um, well, I became pregnant at 20, gave birth at 21, and then had my second baby at 24. So there's that. And then there will be women who are planning or hoping potentially to have children in their 30s. Even if you're not, even if you are not wanting a family, you need to be thinking about your overall health in a pelvic floor area from really from teenage years. Working your pelvic diaphragm as an integral part of your exercise regime is important. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be doing Kegels all the time. Now, Kegels is just a name for isolating the pelvic diaphragm. Don't even get me started on that one, because that's a whole talk on its own. But we have to remember that the pelvic diaphragm is one of many diaphragms in our body. We've got a lot. We've got a throat diaphragm, we've got a respiratory diaphragm. You get my drift. And they all work together. And the way they work together is if our entire body is well, if we are strong, if we are fit, then that all starts, begins, and middles with our gait, the way that we stand and the way that we walk. It's a constant thing. The way that we sit all affects our pelvis and the balance and integrity and strength of the pelvis. And if your pelvis is balanced and strong, then that radiates out to the rest of you and, of course, allows the musculature, ligature, and tendon area structure of the pelvic diaphragm to function as it should, both individually and in tandem with the rest of the body. Yeah, does that all sound like it makes sense, Yvette?
Mhm.
So essentially, when we're talking about pelvic diaphragm and the aging process, so childbirth would be the next thing that would happen to us at our middle age. When I say middle age, I mean the middle bit of our life. Childbirth, of course, changes the pelvic diaphragm. I mean, that kind of is a no-brainer. What we have to bear in mind is that will be completely bespoke to each individual pregnancy within each woman as well as each individual woman. So no two pregnancies are alike, no two deliveries are alike, and no two women will react the same way. So it is really important that when women become pregnant, they are already strong of pelvic diaphragm. It really will help you if you can prepare for your pregnancy. You know, we're all about preparation, aren't we, Yvette?
Mm.
Prepare, prepare, prepare. Keep your pelvic diaphragm strong, just because you're better if it is strong, but particularly when it comes to pregnancy and delivery, having an already strong, healthy awareness of your pelvic diaphragm and your bladder health and your toileting functions will help with your pregnancy as well, because it's quite normal to have far more wheeze during your pregnancy, particularly towards the end when you've perhaps got a handy little elbow pressing on your bladder. That's quite normal, particularly at night time when the baby will happily snuggle down into your pelvic area and press on your bladder all night. I remember it well. I'm sure you do too.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And you felt that little movement. It's like, oh, you're moving. No, no, don't move there.
No,
Just
yeah,
not
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So that's all lovely. But if you find during your pregnancy that your bladder is actually dripping almost constantly, that's not normal. That's not right.
Mhm.
Or if you are getting constant bladder infections and stuff, all of that needs taking to your GP. So if you know what your normal is, and you know that your pelvic diaphragm and your bladder health is intact, then you can spot those things that will prevent problems. Yeah. So
Mm.
again, we're touching on a vast area and we're literally nipping in and nipping back out again. The bladder during pregnancy will get squished, as does every other organ in the whole of the lower part of your thoracic area, because, oh my goodness, I nearly said thorax then, but I'm not aware that we're talking to any ants or insects.
Yeah.
Veered off into the David Attenborough part of my conversation. So, ladies, know it is your thoracic area and the lower part of the bod, obviously, as the baby settles down prior to birth. So, once you have given birth, now the whole act of giving birth is a trauma with hopefully a small t for most of us ladies, but it is a fact, a rather uncomfortable fact, literally and figuratively, that the human female has the most trouble giving birth. If you watch even a giraffe gives birth more easily than we do, because we have developed our upright position, and our spinal and pelvic positions have been rather compromised. That means that us giving birth causes quite a lot of trauma. So we can get some really quite heavy blows to the pelvic diaphragm, the musculature of the pelvic diaphragm, the pelvis itself. We can get things like symphysis pubis and other painful conditions that are postnatal, all of which will be reduced if you are better prepared for your pregnancy. But sometimes, you know what, prepared as you are, sometimes just a little bit of bad luck comes your way, and you can have some unexpected trauma, and that needs very careful management postnatally. So if we can sort of leave the actual pregnancy issue, because that is a whole subject matter on its own, we're talking about pelvic diaphragm health and strength here. So let's skip from pregnancy to after pregnancy, whatever that pregnancy and delivery look like. One thing that I really must impress, that I feel passionately about as a fitness instructor, is please don't buy yourself a running pushchair and start running less than 2 weeks after you've given birth. It distresses me immensely. It doesn't matter whether you're skinny mini and you come out of hospital looking like you didn't give birth, or whether you're still a little bit plump after your pregnancy. The fact of the matter is that your body has just done a massive, brilliant, beautiful job. It's produced a baby, And especially if you've had a cesarean or, you know, any kind of trauma in your delivery, or it was just blooming tiring, and perhaps you've got two older children as well, the last thing you want to be doing to your body while it still has relaxin, which is keeping your joints soft. The relaxin is the hormone that's released to allow your joints to soften. What it's there for is to allow your pelvis, the symphysis pubis and the pelvic joints, to be able to move enough to get that baby's head out. And we've just discussed how we're talking parts of millimeters there because of our evolution. Therefore, that relaxing, not only has it softened your pelvic area, but it's also attacked every other joint in your body. That's why sometimes your knees give way in the later stages of pregnancy, and your spine, and you get backache, because the relaxing cannot just home in on your pelvic joints. It goes to every single joint in your body, your jaw, everything. You must give time for that hormone to be reabsorbed. Okay, it's important because it's done its job, but it takes a while for your body to scoop it up and get rid of it. And particularly if you're breastfeeding, that relaxin may well be present in your body up until your baby is 6 months old. So if you go out pounding the streets on joints whose integrity is compromised by the presence of relaxin, you are setting yourself up for all kinds of problems later on in life. And not least, you are running with your body in a position where it's not suitable for running.
Mm.
So
I think there's an awful lot of problems with women being made to feel that they need to ship back into shape,
yes,
and having that little pregnancy belly is
yes,
unflattering, unwomanly, and we shouldn't look like that. And
yes,
I'm very much of the opinion you've just had a baby, you should look like that,
absolutely.
because yeah, otherwise people are going to sort of start to think, well, did she really have a baby, or was it? Or,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
it's just
I couldn't
nonsense.
agree with you more with that comment. And just because this isn't a medical post, this is just you and me talking as a woman, and I speak for myself here, not as any kind of expert. I personally think for every woman who's got stretch marks and a little baby belly, there's a woman out there with no baby in her arms who would kill for that little belly
Mm,
because she can't have a baby of her own. So
yeah,
you nestle that
yeah,
little bit of soft tummy and know that your partner should look at that little bit of soft belly and go, do you know what? That's the little sacrifice that's been made to produce a beautiful life. And I
mm,
know it sounds very whimsical and
no,
esoteric
that's true.
and spiritual, but it is a truth. And you know what? It is. I'm not saying people should not exercise. I'm a fitness instructor. Why would I say that? What I'm saying is that a little soft bit of tummy skin is small price to pay. And that doesn't mean that your muscles aren't strong. It just means that your skin has stretched. And again, women, that bit of tummy is nothing to do with your pelvic diaphragm. That skin, we're talking about the skin. And so we need to be very careful that we don't mix up the skin, the muscle, the pelvic diaphragm. It's all different for each woman. So moving through that postnatal exercise, it is important not to run, not until you're well ready. A good fitness instructor will tell you when you are ready. But also postnatally, vital that you do your pelvic floor exercises. And of course, that will depend on your delivery. You might be in a lot of discomfort if you've had a big episiotomy or a cesarean. The exercises will be both different and possibly uncomfortable. So it's really important that you are given exercises that are not only appropriate to you individually, but also are practical. Because if you've just got one new baby, that's one thing, because you can sit and do those exercises while you're breastfeeding. Indeed, that's the best time to do them. However, for a mum who's just had a third baby and you've got two others under 6, you are not going to be going, oh yes, I'll just find a quiet half hour to sit down and do my pelvic
Yeah,
floor. So we need to be very practical about
yes,
how and when you do those exercises so that you can indeed empower women by feeling that they're coping, not disempower them by going, oh my God, I've had a really dreadful day and I didn't do my pelvic floor and I'm going to be incontinent for that. We try and achieve the opposite.
hmm,
So again, it's very important for women to be addressed individually with that idea. So postnatally, you may well be a bit incontinent for a little while for obvious reasons. Again, another area where I'm not going to go into all the distinct medical things. Contact me if you want more details. But it is quite normal to be a little bit incontinent after your pregnancy. Your postnatal pelvic diaphragm exercises and examinations should both make sure that that is nothing sinister, and you should be able to resolve it if you are doing everything I aforementioned going forward. So The other thing you shouldn't be doing directly postnatally is sit-ups, curl-ups, crunches, whatever you want to call them. So you want to be really, really careful that you use your abdomen. Remember, the whole of the abdomen has changed its shape. It's done its job. It's carried a baby, and it's gone in exactly the opposite direction that we normally want it to go in when we're doing exercise. So we need to give it a little bit of time. Remember, it's stretched gently, daily, bit by bit over 9 months. You cannot expect those same muscles in the 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks after pregnancy to suddenly whack back to full abdominal strength and start doing curl-ups. That is very silly, also appalling for your back.
How long does
So,
it normally take to get back into shape? To give women a rough idea of what they should be aiming, is it about 6 months, you'd say, or slightly
yeah,
longer?
I would say not unless you've got a reason. Don't give yourself a goal of how long does it take. It'll take as long as it takes. If you are doing it diligently, your body will respond to the treatment you give it, and you will see results, and those results will be satisfying. I think the big mistake women make is, right, I'm going to give birth to my baby. I'm going to get back to exercise 3 weeks after I give birth. And if I've given birth in June, by Christmas, I'm going to be back in my size 8 dress. Well, if you're breastfeeding, you won't do that anyway, because you just won't do that. Your boobs won't fit in the dress, even if your body does. I think the most important thing is to say to women, if you are sensible and diligent and you have the opportunity and there's no extraneous circumstances that are stopping you, you might be poorly, there might be other reasons for this. But if things are, I'm going to use the word vet, normal, my little fingers are up in the air, as normal as your normal is, hate the word normal,
Yep.
but if you set about recovering your pelvic diaphragm and doing the exercises that a good fitness instructor will give you, you should be able to resume and start to modify your exercise to get yourself back to your normal level of exercising, normal style of training. If you're not breastfeeding, I'm a great believer that if you're breastfeeding, you must allow your body to prioritize breastfeeding, not exercise. It's not long, is it, Yvette? It's not long to give up in your life, is it, for a
No,
baby?
no.
And I think within the year that your baby, by your baby's first birthday, you should be able to be thinking, yeah, I can now be back at my old type of training if you're not still breastfeeding, and your body should be regaining its strength and shape. And you certainly should be, not looking at a really wobbly, flat postnatal tummy. And you should be able to exercise quite freely. Yeah, if there's
Okay.
nothing else that's involved. I always I veer away from saying that your body can get back to what it was. The nature of pregnancy and childbirth is that, in my humble, there is about 1% of women who ever go back to the way they were. And I ask, why would you want to? Why do we have to? What is, if we want to get back to full health, full strength? Yeah, but you aren't the way you were. You're a mum. Embrace the change, embrace the new position you're in. Don't try and go back, go forward. And you will be a new person. Your body will be slightly changed, but only for the better. And as long as you're doing your exercises, you're eating well, sleeping well, and following a good health regime, even though your body is slightly changed, possibly in a way you can't even see because it might only be internal, the fact of the matter is that you have a new status, but you can build on that. And of course, the next thing to do is get pregnant again.
Oh.
Undo all that work.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to do that, because if you're going to have a successful second, third pregnancy, you want to be as fit and as healthy as you were before your first one, because then
Yeah.
you then can resume your health very quickly. And of course, the more fit you were and the healthier you were before you went into pregnancy, the easier it will be and the quicker it will be for you, and the more of a habit it will be for you to get yourself back to good health afterwards. But I don't feel it's important to do it by any given goal. I
Mm.
certainly would be worried if a woman wasn't taking any notice of herself and didn't have the impetus to want to be back to fitness when her baby reached her first birthday. If you get to that point and you just don't give a monkeys, that's another discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true. And that's something
Oh,
that again should be addressed with a professional.
of course, I think
Yep.
so. And a good fitness instructor will guide someone that way if they have contact with such a person or
Yep.
someone like yourself. So
Yep.
moving on to the bladder bit. So
Mhm.
your bladder is doing its thing. You've got back to exercise. You are not suffering from incontinence, or if you were, you've sorted it out, and you are now back to you've had your babies. You're now heading towards menopause. Life for us women is just a doddle, isn't it, Yvette? Just a
Mm.
doddle. So
Yeah.
the next thing is whether or not you've had children. Your next thing to plan for in your pelvic floor is menopause. So the next question would be, is it inevitable that I'm going to become incontinent because of the menopause? Again, the answer is no, it's not at all. Again, if you are, babies or no babies, surgery or no surgery, unless there is an extenuating disease or circumstance, if you are keeping your pelvic diaphragm as fit and healthy as you are keeping your biceps, there is no reason why you should automatically become incontinent. Now, hormones will get in the way, aging will get in the way. But again, the more robust buffer you have of fitness and health and awareness before those things happen, you will either reduce the effect or eliminate the effect. Okay, so you may well find if you get quite hormonal with your menopause that yes, a little bit of incontinence happens because of the estrogenic changes in the vagina, which we've mentioned in a previous podcast. But again, the healthier your diaphragm is, then the less that will be. And it does not mean that you should go, oh, there's no point, I'll just stop. You keep on
Mm.
working pelvic diaphragm more than ever, because when your menopause settles, you will return to, or at least find some equilibrium in that menopausal incontinence.
Mm.
So
And
it's
again,
about,
it's about, approaching people like yourself that know the correct exercises to do,
yeah, again,
because there's
it's
too much.
devoted to
Do
each
not
one.
Dr. Google, please. I've
Yes,
seen too many people,
yeah,
including on YouTube, say this is what you need to do, and
yeah,
it's just so wrong. And
absolutely.
in my ignorance prior to meeting you, these are the sort of things that I would have listened to simply because you're desperate, because you
Yes,
think anybody that puts things on the internet is doing it for a professional and ethical reason, and more importantly, knows the physiology of that area and what
yeah,
works best.
yeah. Absolutely. You're absolutely right with that, Yvette. And it's really important because, again, all exercise should be bespoke to the person. Of course, there are generic exercises. Of course, it's a human body, and a bicep bends your arm. That's a fact. But it will, the nuances that are
Hmm.
involved with pelvic diaphragmatic health are very much bespoke to each woman's both
Yep.
medical and physiological history, and also their attitude to exercise. You know, if you've got someone who's a proper obsessed fit thinly, that it's going to be easy. If you've got someone who really doesn't like exercise and perhaps is only thinking about her pelvic floor for the first time when she hits menopause, you've got a different challenge ahead of you.
Mm.
Neither one should be blamed or judged. It's just a case of it's important for us to give the right information so that
Yeah.
that person's health is maintained.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. It's always about assessing where people are, telling them what's achievable, and helping them along that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So incontinence itself, post-menopause. So I'm going to reiterate because it's important. We try not to make these podcasts too long, and you and I could talk all day, couldn't we? Basically, I'm hitting these things and bouncing away from them because all of our subject matters generate more questions than we can ever answer. So if you're listening to this and thinking, oh my goodness, I want to know more about that, I want to know more about that, please do get in contact with us. Any one subject or various subjects, let us know. So talking about post-menopause, again, we then get into this very grey area, if that's not a terrible pun, of
Mm.
aging. So post-menopause, there is this sort of assumption that women go from being perimenopausal, menopausal, old, and that's not the case at all. Postmenopause is not old. It just means that your menopause is basically the active part of it, the bit where you have stopped bleeding and you are no longer fertile. That bit's done. Your body's reset itself. But that does not mean that you are not still hormonal, that you are not still actively feminine, and that you need to exercise as much, if not more than ever. It's just that exercise needs to change because it needs to suit the age that you are. And your bladder at that point, or your pelvic diaphragm, I should say, is no more or less important than it's ever been. The idea that, again, that you will automatically get old and wrinkly and dried up and become, completely out of control, start talking to yourself and wetting yourself is wrong. It just isn't the case. And what one needs to bear in mind is what the bladder is. If I can just touch on that at this point, the bladder is a muscular organ, but it cannot be exercised in and of itself. You can't contract your bladder. You can't strengthen your bladder. What you can do is work all the muscles around the pelvic diaphragmatic pelvis area, and the sphincters of the bowel, the bladder, um, and indeed the whole wall and long tube of the vagina will atrophy and will not function as well if you do not keep it alert, alive, and functioning. Just because we have got old, you may or may not still have a love life in your older age. It all depends on your personal desires and circumstance. But if you there is a saying, if you don't use it, you lose it, and that is truth. So we need to make sure that just because potentially you're not having a sex life anymore, that you don't contract those muscles of the vagina. It is very important because that will then strengthen the bladder urethra, because these things are all interconnected. It also keeps the brain not having a conversation with that part of your body. If you become lazy in your pelvic diaphragm, your brain will just really not bother. Everything will just, gravity will take over. If you keep contact, a conversation, a proprioceptive neuromuscular conversation going on with all parts of your body, you will have more awareness of it. So if there's any changes, that's really important, because you then can see changes that might be a health warning. But also you will keep them vital, you will keep them alive, and they will not atrophy in the same way because you're still using them. That you will keep them, moist. You will,
Mm.
things won't dry up and go all flaky if you are still interested in them. Is that a polite way of putting it? I don't want to go into too much detail here in this particular podcast, but I hope people get the gist of what I'm saying. That it
Yes,
is
definitely.
important. It
Yep.
is important, because then we don't, just because we've become older doesn't mean that we can just allow ourselves to become incontinent or structurally, muscularly weak in that area, just because we perhaps aren't interested in it anymore, or we're not using it in the same way. It is important because, remember, if our pelvic diaphragm becomes weak, then our walk becomes weak, our gait becomes weak, yes, our spine starts to collapse. It is the beginning of the end, because everything will shrink around it, and we lose our upright gait, we lose our power of posture, because the pelvic diaphragm is integral to every other diaphragm and every other part and fascia of our body.
Yep. It's very true. And I've always said keep your skeleton healthy because
Yeah,
that's what the muscles need to bolt onto, not
that
literally, obviously.
that
And it's the fundamental core of everything that goes on inside.
yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that we talk about all the different types of incontinence. Again, I don't want to go through them all here because it just takes too long. But there are many different types of incontinence: prolapse, there's fecal incontinence, lack of control of all those parts of the body. But people don't realize that a lot of the times, um, it it is not necessarily that there's anything to do with disease or weakness. It can just be as simple as you sit too much, you don't walk enough, your posture is poor, your walk is poor. And all of those things have a direct effect upon the pelvic diaphragm and the pelvis itself, and can impinge upon those aforementioned sphincters and muscular areas. And you can,
How often,
oh, sorry,
sorry,
go.
darling,
Mm,
how often do people need to move? I mean, obviously, if somebody has a desk job, it's difficult to move during working hours, I'll call it in
yeah.
inverted commas. Would it be okay, especially at this time of the year, if people sort of exercise by doing a good stiff brisk walk at weekends? Would that be sufficient to maintain overall
Mm,
health and gait, or is it something they should try and do every second day as a minimum?
yeah, just a walk at the weekends. Anything is better than nothing, but it ain't going to be enough for real proper fitness gain, health gain. My suggestion would be, if you can only do long walks at the weekend because your week life doesn't allow for it, then do those long walks or any kind of aerobic activity. not necessarily running. We can discuss running at another time, but certainly a really good, robust, pacey walk for a minimum of half an hour. You want to sling that in at the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. But what I would suggest is if you're sat at a desk, firstly, if it is at all possible to stand for part of the time, please do. It's becoming more fashionable, I know, in offices now to have standing chairs and to encourage people to have standing desks. I think that's important. The very cliche, but nonetheless vital, take the stairs, not the lift. If you are in a building that is tall, take the stairs, not the lift, and do them
Mm.
down as well as up. Going down is just as good for your body as going up. If you can take a walk, a brisk walk out of your office at lunchtime, even if it's 15, 20 minutes max, and then allows you to sit and have some food, and do the walk before you have your food if you can. Um, just walk at a pace that gets you out of breath. You don't need to run. Just walk as if you're in a proper hurry. And help, if you can find someone who can help you with your walk, if you can get your gait, your actual walk, it's something I specialize in. Foot health, spinal health, walking, pelvis, they're all related. If you can look at someone's walk and adjust it so that it becomes a really purposeful, pragmatic, useful walk, my goodness, you burn so many more calories and you also benefit the health of your body
Mm.
instantly. It's an instant change. And if you can do that in your lunch break, do it. And of course, you will be then firing your pelvic diaphragm.
Somebody used to say, "Swing of the hips, 2, 3." I think it recalls memories of gym teachers at school. I
Yeah.
mean, and to walk from the hips and things like that. Is that sensible, or is that, you know,
Ooh.
urban myth?
Right. Oh, that I can't answer that here, Yvette, because that's a really
Okay,
big question. I have to see
okay.
you. You'd have to give me a visual on that one. But
Oh
walking,
no, yeah.
walking is yeah, walking from your hips. That's a very good way of putting it. Instead of just walking without thinking about anything. A lot of us walk. We do a few things without thinking. We don't think about breathing. We just do it. We just do it, don't we? We don't ever think about
Mm,
how we're breathing. And a lot of us breathe very poorly because we're sitting badly or standing badly. And we don't think about walking. We just do it. And we don't think about how am I walking.
mm,
So that lifts the question of all the things you can do, even if you're not a sporty person or a person who loves the gym or whatever, your walk can give you so much health benefit. Just getting your posture, your walk, how you stand, whether you're still or whether you're moving in a standing position, how you lift things, how you move around in your everyday pursuits. If you're working, I don't know, a shelf stacker or a milkman or a whatever, or sitting in an office, how you sit, how you. Let's face it, we spend more time not in the gym than we do in the gym. So how we do the stuff we do most of the time really matters.
yeah, I think it's something that people should get in touch with you about because um, these things are all key.
Yeah. And they all affect your pelvic diaphragm. Now,
Mm,
I expect people who are listening to this were expecting us to talk about all the different types of incontinence and, really focus on the bladder and how to lift and hold. I don't ever teach that in this environment because lift and hold what with it? I get so cross when I see pelvic floor exercise where people go and lift, hold, and release. What? Lift and hold what? It's such an
cup of
ethereal.
coffee.
Yes. So, no, if people want pelvic diaphragm exercises, they do need to contact me because A, I will be very bespoke for them and B, far, far, far more detailed. But so much of your pelvic diaphragmatical health and the fact that you won't become incontinent is far more to do with everything else but sitting and pulling up and pulling down. It starts, you can sit and pull your pelvic floor until the cows come home. But if you are sitting badly, walking badly, you are unhealthy, your posture is poor,
Mm,
all of those things will impinge upon the distribution of the health in your pelvic diaphragm, the pressure on your bladder, the awareness of your bladder and bowel. And it's a much bigger picture, in my opinion.
yeah, and I think that's one of the key things that I've picked up from doing your Pilates classes is specifically the breathing and being
Yeah,
aware of the lungs, etc. And that was just very important, and particularly important at the moment, obviously with
yeah,
the dreaded
COVID.
COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. And if
yeah,
you're in your and breathe, your diaphragm and your throat diaphragm will also benefit. They all work together. Ask any singer about the conversation between your respiratory and pelvic diaphragm, and they'll tell you it's absolutely vital. We don't think about it because we're not taught. Why would we?
mm,
It's quite a big thing to teach. But once you get it, when I get clients who have had incontinence problems or, pelvic problems, pelvic pain, pudendal neuralgia, as we like to call it, all of those things, when you get symphysis pubis, it's flipping agony. It really, really hurts. And when you realize that it's not about pulling up your pelvic diaphragm, that's just a small percentage of it that actually comes after you've corrected the pelvic dysfunction or imbalance, the spinal positioning, and the general gait and positioning of the person you're dealing with. And they go, wow, I'm just so much more comfortable. And their
mm,
toileting habits change, their understanding of the whole engine of their body and how it works as a unit. Oh, I'm going off onto one a bit. I do love it.
mm. No,
Also,
I know, but we do have to tell people it's not something that can't be sorted. And
that's
even
right.
if you're a woman that's just thinking, "Oh, I had a bit of trickle down my leg,"
Yes,
and that, and then it's that, "Oh no, I was imagining it. It must have been something else." But
yes.
now is the time to act. Pick up the phone, contact Ali, and start now because it is a lot of the time reversible.
Yeah, and we want to avoid vaginal and bladder mesh, because if there's one thing that will mess your life up, it's having that pudding when it isn't
Mm,
necessary. It's
yeah,
just such a shame when
very,
that happens unnecessarily.
yeah, absolutely. So, oh,
All
we're
good.
nearly at 50 minutes. I think we've probably,
We've over egged the pudding, haven't we?
yes,
As we
indeed.
do. That's entirely my fault this time.
No,
Um,
it's fine. I think, this is so, so important. Um,
Okie dokie. Mm.
yeah. So,
So to conclude, if we could just summate, if people are interested in the hormonal side of uh, vaginal health, bladder health, and the incontinence therein, do contact Yvette, because if you see our previous podcast about HRT and the things that you can do with the actual tissue and hormonal changes that can go on in that intimate area, do contact Yvette. She can help you with it. You can also contact me, because there's kind of two sides to that.
mm,
If you are looking at the physical fitness of pelvic diaphragmatical health with relationship to fecal incontinence, urinary incontinence, and prolapse, etc., please do feel free to contact me with a view to planning your pelvic diaphragm health, whatever age you are, and also if you're concerned about any incontinence you might have presently, whatever age you are, again, whatever the cause might be, do feel free to make contact with us via our Facebook pages, websites, personal messaging, etc.
indeed. So, at this point, we should love and leave everybody else. And when we speak the next time, it'll be another hopefully exciting topic that's useful to everybody.
Absolutely. We might go down the road of, we've got a lot to cover, haven't we? Mental health,
Hmm.
etc. All of that. The emotion. How about the emotions surrounding um, being a woman and dealing with family bereavements? I think
Mm,
the whole subject of death and aging, when we talk about healthy aging, healthy death, how we embrace that, a subject that you and I have discussed, but perhaps could be a surprising one for people to hear
I
us
think,
having a little chit chat about.
yeah, definitely, because for some people, days when you go into the menopause is perhaps the time of life when your parents
Yeah,
pass.
yeah,
And for some people, it can also bring on the menopause.
yeah,
The trauma of losing parents. I think, I've spoken
yeah,
to people that it's happened to, and I think potentially whether it had anything to do with mine or it was just me and my horrible, endometriosis, and that was
Yes.
Everything else was just on top of it. But yes,
Yes.
so right at this point,
Yeah.
we'll love you and leave
Say
you.
au
And
revoir. Thank you to everyone who's listened. I do hope you found our wafflings of two normal women. I
mm,
said normal because you said it. Interesting and informative. Goodbye, everybody, and goodbye, Vet.
yep, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.